for the first special budget meeting on January 17th. And the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I hear that we have two little birthday girls in the audience. Their birthday is actually Thursday, but I'm going to ask them to lead us in the Alexis and Avery. Kowski, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job.
So much fun.
Not needs coffee. There's spare copies in the. Yeah. If you need any.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is citizens' comments. If we have any citizen comments at this time, they're on Zoom or on, from our audience here. Please state your name and your address for our secretary's information. Anyone in our Zoom audience? No, in our live audience at this time?
Citizens comments.
Citizen comment.
I'm part of the Marion Fisher PTO Playground Project, and I'm just here to see the conversation and add any input if any questions are required. Just give me a minute.
Name and that.
My name is
Yeah.
Jillian Noley, and I live at 198 Ravenel Road.
Thank you. And I had the good pleasure of going to a PTO meeting last week. And the Marriott Fisher PTO members are very interested in the budget process and want to help.
Thank you. Good to hear. Okay. So you have an educational update.
I do, in relation to the preparation of the budget. So our goal, or at least Bill and my goal for tonight's session is really to review the budget in its entirety. Bill's gonna go over the process that he used to develop the zero-based budget and how he built that. And then he's gonna provide you information on those main budget drivers that we have every year, and we have obviously some this year. We hope to conclude with a discussion of the townwide presentation and what that will look like. So we're looking for your feedback on that. But before we get into the budget, I really need to say, I want to commend Bill for the collaborative manner that he built this budget. He had in-depth conversations with directors, principals, security coordinator, so he could best understand the needs of each department. And he didn't simply roll numbers over. That's the easy thing to do, right? To take the budget and roll it over. He didn't do that. He took a lot of time to talk to us all. And I especially need to thank him personally for working with me closely. We reviewed every budget line to come in with this budget at the rate that it's at. He'll tell you we were much higher when we compiled everything together. And his insight and his expertise in accounting is phenomenal. And I just want to thank him publicly because it was a long process. However, I think we all feel that our voices were heard. So I hope you feel that way too.
I'm going to turn it over to Bill Douglas and let him start us off.
Sure. Thanks, Melinda. I'd like to start with a little summary of the budget process. In early December, we sent out the budget templates across the district to all of the directors and several department heads. Templates were completed and returned to the finance department by early January. At that time, I started compiling a preliminary look at the budget. And Melinda's not kidding. When we rolled everything up initially, we were at a $22.2 million budget, which is a $2.4 million increase, which translates into 3.2 mil. Obviously, that was a very shocking number, but the spirit of the exercise this year was to try to cast a wide net and appropriately budget for the departments where we could. So that first crack at it is exactly what we got. We then held meetings with individual directors to review the requests in some detail. Each submission sheet, which are in this nice big binder, if anybody would care to flip through it, was reviewed on a line by line level, and some difficult decisions were made on where to trim back the budget. These cuts included things like requests for new positions, new equipment, professional development courses, and some significant cuts in the original IT budget. Also took a look at the calculation of some of the significant line items related to compensation, payroll, and benefits, also to take kind of a fresh look at that. And we'll talk about all this stuff in a little bit more detail in a minute. All of this effort, and take a moment here to say thanks to all the directors, in particular, Chris Jones and Pupil Services. I think Belinda, I think we met with Chris for 2 hours. And really just parsed through his budget pretty finely to try to get us to a real budget in pupil services. And you'll see the numbers and hopefully you agree, but they reflect a very real expectations for 2024, and hopefully it stands up. All of those efforts produced the draft you have before you tonight, which is a $21.2 million budget, which is a $1.4 million increase, or approximately 1.9 mil. I want to make it very clear that this is after an estimated 400,000 in special ed excess costs. So just so everyone, as I did a little bit of research and talked to Melinda about what happens typically in other districts, and that's usually baked into the budget at the onset. So that's what we've done here. I mentioned the cuts that were done as we reviewed each of the submissions, just a few examples. There was a new position for high school dean of students proposed that was eliminated in the first cut. Middle school math interventionist, professional development across the entire middle school. It was not that there's not going to be any professional development, but the method under which they were proposing to do it was pretty expensive. So that was one of the items. A significant number of some new plant equipment that was decided, we decided we'd try to go another year without investing in it. Painting of the high school hallways and lockers, and which is an item that I'm going to be approaching the town about, similar to the locker rooms, but we'll see where that goes. And then I mentioned some significant cuts in IT equipment and software. So I list those off for you just so you know that the level of scrutiny that those initial submissions underwent before to get us to where we are today. This isn't something where everybody threw a wish list at us, we added it up, and this is where we ended up. There's been some pain to get to the point where we are right now. After these cuts and the review of the key calculations I mentioned, like health insurance, we were left with five main drivers of the increase of the $1.4 million increase. Approximately $710,000 of that is getting pupil services where it should have been all along. In the past, I think everyone would probably agree, we didn't have a really good pupil services budget. I think as a product of that 2-hour meeting with Chris Jones, I think we're in a much better spot right now. You won't be surprised to hear that the drivers are the same three that we mention all the time. It was primarily transportation, placements, and contracted services. Salary and wage increases were the next highest driver at approximately $250,000. We had tightened up our assumption for raises this year. We used 2.5% instead of 3%, because we think we can get away with that. So that accounts for $250,000 of the increase. One of the challenges that we faced this year was moving 4 previously grant-funded positions into the BOE budget. These are crucial positions that really have a lot to do with improving test scores, but also helping students with the challenges of coming out of COVID and sort of that mental health picture. Those positions are the high school social worker, the middle school / elementary school media center person. I'm not sure if the audience is aware of that, but that position is actually split. So the person who handles that has a full plate running back and forth between the two media centers. There's a middle school math teacher position and another sixth grade math teacher position. So previously, I think for the last 2 years, those 4 positions were funded by grants. Unfortunately, that funding is now gone, so those positions have to be assumed by the Board of Ed budget. The next 2 items are what everybody's going to be talking about this year. It's price increases, it's general inflation. The first one is in Bill Birch's plant budget, where his supplies and materials line is up by about 116,000, primarily driven by price increases. And then, as no surprise to anybody, price increases in fuel drove another $108,000 of additional budget.
How much was the grant funded position?
In total, about 209,000. The remainder, to get us to the $101.4 million increase, is really a collection of a bunch of smaller items, but they really all come back to inflation and price increases, primarily around instructional supplies across all of the schools. Before we start down a detailed discussion of the budget lines, I'd like to take a minute to talk about how we have presented the school budget to the town in the past. I know that this board and a lot of the employees here in the district have invested a considerable amount of time and effort in producing the past presentation, which was very colorful and had some great information in it. However, I've had many taxpayers and parents mention the presentation is, and to quote one of them, a bit much. Sometimes less can be more. And I think in this situation, I'd like to suggest that we think about maybe paring back that presentation a bit to focus on the key drivers that we've just mentioned. And then possibly as simple as one slide in support of that by department. So that would put us at 14 slides for the presentation, which is a pretty good sized presentation to begin with. And that will allow each department head or director to dive into the challenges that their department is facing and exactly why they have put their money where they have. I think that would give the public, this board and the Board of Finance a pretty clear picture of how we got to where we are right now. So with that, we can open up the discussion to take a walk through line by line. I'd entertain any comments you had if you've had a chance to take a look at the presentation, that the slides that were sent around earlier.
Well, opening up, let's explain what you did with health insurance and the payroll.
Oh, sure.
Mhm.
So in the past, it appears that the health insurance, the payroll and the health insurance lines, which as you would imagine are pretty significant components of our budget across all the departments, appeared to be calculated by applying a growth factor to the previous year's budget. Because we were scrutinizing every line at a pretty high level, we did it a little bit differently this year. And I'll switch over here to show you this is and I've hidden all the payroll dollars just because folks can get a little sensitive about that. But what this document really reflects is it's our payroll register. It's what we use to pay all Board of Ed employees on any given payroll cycle. And what we did was we layered in column N there and O and P to take a look at what each individual employee's healthcare coverage selection was. And then we used that to spill out the costs and added that up to get the total healthcare benefits for the district. These costs reflect only the district's portion. So this is after what I used 18% as the estimate of the copay, if you will, or the employee share for health insurance. That's another factor. In the past, I believe that we budgeted for the full 100%.
Okay.
Now, as I was just mentioning to Kathleen, that we are tightening things up in the same way we actually did last year on the town side. The health insurance line appears to be a spot where our departments would generally budget pretty conservatively in order to have some cushion to transfer around if things didn't go well. This approach tightens that up a bit, I think, and hopefully gives us a more accurate number. But what the board and everyone needs to understand is that cushion, both on the town side and the school side, has always been largely utilized to cover other areas. So even though it may not have resided in, let's say, for example, at the town, we have a contingency line that's built into the budget. It's not as big as it should be, but at least there is something there for exactly that, contingencies, things that come up that weren't expected. I believe in fishing around and how things were done in the past, the bit of cushion that we had in the benefits line, both on the town side and the school side, really did act as our contingency. So people need to understand that we're cutting it closer to the bone, I think, than we ever have. But it was necessary to get us to where we are now, which some folks would say is, is relatively high to begin with. But I think this approach was warranted, given that the line, should be correct. And if the board decided to add a contingency line in, then it should be labeled as a contingency line, and it should be there. It's more transparent, so that if something does pop up, that those funds could be tapped.
What percentage did you use as an increase?
So to do this calculation on an employee by employee basis, we used a 10% increase for this year, which is the percentage that the broker had
Okay.
informed us was relevant. Now, I'm sorry, I gotta get this out, I'll forget it.
Mhm.
Keep in mind that last year, I believe that number was 8%.
Okay.
At this point in the year, and it
Right,
came in
that's
at
what
10.
Yes.
So I didn't think it was prudent to go with 12, but that number is preliminary, so you never know. I'm sorry.
So our increase though, like our actual increase was known at the beginning of April, which was already too late, I think. Because
That's
we've
right.
already
Yeah.
established a
Yes.
budget and an approved mill rate and all this business.
Right.
Is there any way to have that happen?
Well, we
After.
could tell Bill to put in 12 just to
Right.
save.
Well,
our
I'm just
butts.
saying, we can't wait, The
No.
timing can't, okay.
The timing.
Because it was
off.
literally like 2 weeks difference, I think. It was
Right.
like a shame,
It was.
and it was like
so
$66,000.
If we decide as a board to put that 2% cushion in there because we've read articles that the state program is in trouble.
Right.
And they're estimating 10 now, which is flat from last year, when they told us at this time 8. We're unsure of that 10, we can better put 12 in there, just to
Right,
just to
right.
be.
I just feel
safe.
like I don't want us to be behind the 8 ball right out of the gate. You know what I mean? Which is what kind of
Right.
happened to us last.
And the fact that he's based it on this current payroll of
Right.
slate
It's more
of
actual, yeah, right.
Right.
people, where we may have ins and outs of
Right.
of employees who decide to take a family plan, and some single people leave and then come in and take a family plan. That could change the mix of the number.
That was
also.
gonna be one of my questions too. Is it 10% no matter what plan? Is it just?
Yes.
So single, married, doesn't matter,
yes.
it's 10%,
Yep.
10%.
Well,
And that's what was applied across all.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
what.
I think we'd be cutting it way too close to the bone, I think. I think we need to, even if it's gonna be a contingency, I think we gotta bump that up because we're not gonna know. It's too late. But that's my opinion.
No, I agree with you, Bill.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Bill, I like your approach, because so many times, even in the Board of Finance meetings. Our own meetings and the selectmen, you spend so much time on $1,000 line item rather than going right after the big drivers.
Mhm.
Get the big drivers out of the way. It's not to say that $1,000 line item is not important, it is. But let's get the big drivers. Two things. One is on the pupil services. I know it's a $710,000 increase. Do we know what it could have been or would have been had we not had the Bradley? Because that is gonna be something that we need to put out there. That this is not the, you know what I mean, the worst case scenario would have been fully loaded. No Bradley program, but we do have these initiatives in place to reduce this.
Right.
The second one is, have we accounted for the increase, possible increase? On lunch program for next year, considering the wells dry in the state and fed.
So there is some real activity now at the state level to fund school lunches through June, and there's another push to make Connecticut a lunch-free state. We don't know where that ends, but we're really hoping that we're funded till June, according to Lisa, for this, the remainder of this year. And the science that goes behind building her menus, she feels that she can cover the costs associated with that until June.
So
Where that plays out next year is up for discussion. So we were kind of hoping to put food service like over here while we work on this budget.
Yeah.
But we know that there's 160,000 in that budget for healthcare alone. So when Bill says they're not really self-sustaining, he's right, because 160,000 of that is the healthcare that BOE covers.
so
So
that might be one of those first contingencies that we have to think of. Because it sounds like what Heather was saying. Timing's not gonna be on our side with the government saying, yeah, you're funded or not funded. So, all right, thank you.
Okay, so. Do you want Bill to increase the percentage up to say 12% in the healthcare?
I would be in favor of that personally.
Yeah.
Until we get better information, you know, it is what it is.
or do you want to hold 2% in a contingency line so that it's separated out?
I think that would be dangerous only in that. If we explain that to the Board of Finance, that'll go immediately.
Yeah. but
If we
what-
put it in,
where it belongs.
if we put it in the insurance line.
Yeah.
If we put it in the insurance line. And with the reason why, I think it would be safe there.
All right, but what he does for the school, I think you need to do for the town, because we need to match.
And that is, that's still in flight. The town budget is coming together right now,
Okay.
but the school is trending a little bit faster. And
Okay.
that's by
But for
design.
the same reason. Yeah, right. Same,
Well, you're building a book, right?
Yes,
Both books, right?
Yeah.
same rationale, the same rationale behind it, because they're gonna come back. Tell us, could even be 50%, but it'll be after we end it into the Board of Finance.
They can't cover their claims right now, so that's a problem.
Yeah. I read that article, Val sent us that article.
I sent it to everyone.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question that's related to the services. You were very detailed, Bill, in saying how detailed you were going over with Dr. Jones, and I like and I respect Dr. Jones. But did we not do that in the past, the detailed analysis line by line? I mean, don't we do that every year? It's great that we did it, but
So what happened in the past is in particular, the contracted services. That number was never appropriately funded in that line based on what we were using at the time. And so at this point, we use a lot of contracted services, RBTs, nurses, paras, to keep those kids in district rather than,
Right.
putting them in the least keeping them in the least restrictive environment. And so that number was never really accurately budgeted for. And that contracted service line has always been that one that fluctuates. So 50,000 when we're spending 230,000
right, it's always
is
under.
a big,
Yeah.
is
yeah.
a big jump. We didn't add additional tuitions in the budget. However, we do know we have some students phasing out. One in March at a considerable tuition. And another, I think, by the end of the year. So we believe with those two tuitions there, we get that buffer in case some other students move in.
Okay, thank you.
Now that, to be fair, that's always a moving target. Right. And every budget director that we've had has done it a little bit differently. And I do like Bill's approach. And I had a question about that too, because it was explained to me the last time about the reimbursement. You know, it was like 70% after the first 4.5 times or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that the same approach that you have used this time?
So last year, we were at about 384,000. We used an estimate this year of about 400,000.
The access cost.
Right, correct.
Right, they're supposed to work on that this year through at the state level. We'll see.
Supposedly there was that additional pot of money that they put aside for those districts that receive excess cost, and there was supposed to be I don't want to call it a hierarchy, but a priority list of those districts that haven't been funded appropriately on their special education. I was told Thompson was supposed to be in the first bucket. I haven't followed back up on that, but I will reach back out again because there was additional funding that was set aside for that because it hasn't ever been fully funded. So,
Unless you're on the other side of the state where they often fund 110% of the total cost.
right. Well, and that's always been my argument was, and that was one of my arguments to our local representatives was that our district in particular seems to get punished on our special ed costs because we took the initiative to bring in a program at a lower cost because it's better for our students. We have actually other districts using it, but it's those districts that don't make those plays for their students that are getting essentially rewarded because they're getting more costs covered because they're not actually putting in that additional work, but I'll get off my soapbox.
I have one question about special ed and then one other question for you. So on the listing, there's a whole bunch of line items that have a thing through it for this coming year. And I'm thinking, why don't we need any of these things?
So-
Have they been moved? to
So no, that's a
someplace else?
great question, Heather. So as part of the meeting with Dr. Jones, one of the things that struck him was how fragmented the special ed, the pupil services budget was and how it was split across so many different accounts. So what he did as part of his budgeting effort was trim down the number of accounts that were used. So a lot of the accounts that have a zero in there, they're
Yeah.
they're budgeted in other lines. Because it just wasn't clear why those accounts were split up the way they were. So he felt that using a fewer number of accounts, and Melinda, jump in if I'm not getting
Yeah,
this
there was a
right,
lot of redundancy too. And then when he would be applying a certain line item to a purchase order, like it was going into two different places, but yet for the same exact purpose. So there was redundancy there. So he just kind of combined and put it into one line. So that's why you're seeing those.
And I did see like under elementary and under middle school, there is a line for special ed in both of those categories outside of the pupil services. I didn't know if that was a double dip or if that it was intentionally. There's only one line item on each one. It's like, where did I see it?
If you can give me give us the number to the.
It was like 97 is the middle school. There's like, it's not a lot, like $500, but and I'm pretty sure I saw one for elementary too, but
Yeah,
it's
it's like
special ed,
130.
instructor.
School special ed and instructional supplies, because sometimes there's specialized supplies that they need.
Because it also, I think is listed under his and two. For elementary and middle school instructional supplies,
Yeah.
and it has a number, so I maybe, and that,
Maybe we
they're
can
small
look at
dollar
that.
amounts, I just noticed it.
Well, the elementary school is 2,409. That's line 138.
I see, elementary school special ed instructional supplies.
Wait,
Right.
Joe.
So that's for the general population to use a special ed, that's the ins and outs, it's not actually pupil services.
Elementary, when I'm looking at the Marriott Fisher budget or the middle school budget, and it says elementary special ed instructional supplies, and there's an amount of $2,046 there. That to me means that that's an appropriation for the special education teachers to buy instructional supplies for their students, specific to whatever they need. There might be redundancy. on
Yeah, it's
like
like 205 is middle school special ed instructional supplies.
Yep.
And there may be an elementary one too, I think.
There-
too.
it
I
just
couldn't
says
find it right now.
Elementary.
There is an element in line
other supplies.
97 is, line 97 is middle school, and line 138 is elementary school.
Yeah, and so then it's again on 205.
205.
And 205,
Yeah, 205 is in pupil services as
Oh, is that-
middle
Oh, yeah.
school,
I see.
elementary instructional
Yep.
supplies.
Good catch. We'll ask Chris
Yeah,
about that.
we'll see if those can be eliminated.
And then
yeah, but that's only 1,500.
yeah, they're not the same
The
amount.
elementary school is 2,400 and the middle school is 500. So do we add them all together? Or are they particular to those
Do we have
schools?
backup sheets for that?
Yeah, all you need to do is just. Give the reason why. It's-
Yeah.
It's probably legit.
Right.
It's-
And then I had a non-special ed question, but it was a building maintenance question. So I heard that you're removing the painting of the lockers and the painting of the hallways. And I believe this was one of those things that was on the list for our future review and accreditation and all this other stuff with the Alliance, whatever.
Yep.
And I didn't know if the timing, if we keep bumping this another year, are we getting close to when this is gonna come to roost, you know? And are there other things that maintenance wise need to be on the list that we're already putting on the 2-3 year plan, you know?
The plan was that the lockers at the high school and the halls at the high school were the next thing that we were gonna ask the town to cover, like they did the upgrade of the locker rooms for athletics.
If it's not in our operating budget, it's a one-time thing, that's the town is. Good about talking about that, not necessarily funding the whole thing, but.
Right,
um, Then it's not such an increase on our budget if we get to do
so
that.
then my next question is, knowing we have a referendum at the end of the month, and fingers crossed it all goes through, but if it doesn't, what of that are we going to decide that we kind of need to add to this budget, you know?
That's a good question, because we had the 4 entrances. The entrances to the building, we actually had that in Bill's budget, and Bill and I decided that we would take it out because the referendum would decide that. You're right. We, at this moment in time, we took it out because we felt like it was being addressed here, but if it's not, then
need
I
to
think we
address it.
need to regroup and figure that out. But that was like, what was that, 165,000, 195,000?
We're still, this is the hallways and the
Yep,
lockers.
no, not the hallways and lockers, the entrances, that one,
170,000.
170.
And what about like the HVAC boiler is like that?
That isn't even
Okay,
addressed
so,
at all.
okay,
And if the referendum should not be successul, even the doors should not go into our operating budget, that
No,
should go to the
We'd
town.
ask the town to.
We should ask the town
Yeah.
to fund that.
Because that's a capital expense. Painting theoretically is not a capital expense. But we'll still ask the.
Theoretically, but
Well, the
Painting
lockers
is
is specialized painting and it's expensive. It's that electro, whatever.
right, right.
It's-
We could make the argument that it is, but.
So are we eligible for any Alliance District monies? Like, you know how we had was it 2 years in a row or 4 years
200,000.
with Mayflexer and all that? Is any of that a possibility?
So we have 200,000 that we got last year and this year, and that was approved by the state legislature.
Yeah.
Thanks to Bill and I and Mayflex are going to cry on people's shoulders at the state. So they finally put that into law that we got that 200 each year, but that's not guaranteed moving forward.
Can we cry harder this year and go as a group?
Well, I would like to, but those dollars are already more or less spoken for. Abby Consolo's salary, who is the pupil, the student service coordinator, support coordinator there, and the Navient software are combined in that grant. And then the little bit of extra money that is in the grant has been funding the upgrade of the culinary arts program.
So when,
So
all right, so hold that thought. So when does that grant run out and then that becomes part of us? Is that one more year running?
So that technically runs out this year, but I have good hope that we're gonna be refunded so that Abby's salary will remain on that grant, like other salaries
Yeah.
remain on federal grants. And then the Navient software will remain there. If there is some extra dollars, and I remember I wrote in my briefs about the reading upgrade. So I'm hoping to cover, there's about 19,000 in this year's Alliance budget to go toward that $100,000 reading upgrade we're obligated to do. So through grant funding, I think we're gonna squeak by, and they've split the invoice over 2 years. So then the other 50,000 will come out of my curriculum line for next year, and then we'll get it covered. But the reason I say that is if there's extra wiggle room, say they give us 200,000 next year, we've gotten what we need to open up the culinary arts program, and we're in a good place. Then we could consider some of these other open positions that the principals asked for. Like Dr. Mayo would really love to see a dean of students up at the high school. Kim would like a math interventionist here at the middle school. I mean, those are positions that they will talk to you about, and I'm not gonna ask them not to. They should express why they put those in their budget. But I feel like if we have potential grant money to cover one of those, then as a board, we'll decide, is it the dean of students that's most important, or is the math interventionist most important? At this moment in time, we just couldn't fund those positions too, because we're absorbing those 4 grant positions that I don't see anywhere to reduce. Knowing the amount of work that the social worker is doing at the high school, I just don't see how I can cut that position.
What was that grant that went away? It was the ARP.
Yeah.
So, all right, so the ARP grants are gone. The Alliance grant is
It's a
possibly,
state grant.
but that's possibly might be
Refunded.
renewed. Well, by all standards, do we still qualify
Yes,
as an Alliance district?
we're an opportunity district. We're kind of even,
So we're beyond Alliance, we're now opportunity.
we're in a, with it,
I mean, it's
yes.
it's sad to say that, but however, we need to try to go and get whatever we can.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Right.
which I know you are. I'm just wondering, does this reflect if we do not get funds, which,
No, it doesn't.
right, so that. I don't want to paint doom and gloom, but we've gotta,
We need to be prepared for
we
that.
gotta be prepared with, as you said before, a contingency of. What if?
I don't know, that's kind of state law that it's the money's due to us. So I pretty,
Yeah,
I
but they held
feel
out on
pretty
us,
good.
didn't they?
Huh?
Didn't they hold out on us?
That's only because we weren't written into the law at the time. And now that's changed. When Melinda and I went to Hartford, and pled our case, it finally came around, right?
Yeah.
But with the 26% student body that qualifies for special ed, we're gonna get,
We gotta be
we're
pretty
gonna
close.
get it. I'm pretty sure we're gonna get it.
And that's 400 or 200,000 a year.
200. Right now, I'm really hoping because we're in that bucket of 10 lowest performing districts, they'll look at it differently. We weren't there when they wrote this legislation 2 years ago. So I'm kind of hoping. Then that would be nice, because then we could come back and say, these are the add-ons. Remember, that money isn't supposed to balance our budget. That money is supposed to give us above and beyond.
Yes, the
what
enhancements.
is. So I know that Dr. Mayo is very passionate about that dean of student, and Kim is equally as passionate about the math interventionist. And I don't want to not let you hear why they want those positions, but after a lot of reflection, at this point, I just want to maintain what we have.
Well, that's. No, I agree. We should hear about it, because even if it doesn't happen now, perhaps next year or whenever we. Once it's settled, then maybe we can afford it.
Let's kind of go through this ourselves, starting with the high school, if anybody has any questions on the high school. And there's not a lot of increase in high school. The one item is the NEAS line, 65. We've added $35,000 for NEAS and block scheduling.
Right, and that number was actually higher when Dr. Mayo came in. They do need to start to do some professional work in preparing for NEAS. You know, that takes a couple of years to get all those reports written. A lot of that work is done in the summer and after school. So teachers that work on those teams, they get compensated at their curriculum rate for that extra work. And believe me, it's money well spent. Because there's a ton of reports that they have to write and a whole presentation they have to put together. So they need to start working on that this summer. So I did pare back his initial ask on that. And I also pared back, they are moving to a block schedule primarily because we're trying to line up with Putnam so that we can share programming back and forth. And the only way to do that is we have to more or less line up our schedule to theirs so it'll work. But they have students very interested in our culinary program. We have students interested in their healthcare program. And so why can't we're 8 minutes away. Why can't we allow for students to take courses in each other's schools? And it's a way for us not to have to add any kind of programs when we can share programs. So I think it's a step in the right direction for efficiencies. I'm not going to say it's going to save either of us money, but I think it'll open up opportunities for students in both districts. And as long as we can figure out the scheduling together, and I think Dr. Mayo started that work already, and the staff is on board with that. There is PD around that, though. When you're moving from a 50-minute period to a 90-minute period, there is some professional training on how to deliver your lessons effectively. What kind of time do you give students independently? So there's a lot of talk around that has to happen.
And we did discuss that we would not interrupt or cut back on the ability for our 8th graders to middle school to move up to the high school. Remember, we arranged our schedule so that the 8th grade students have an opportunity to take freshman high school classes.
No, that was I said, I'm not changing any schedule if that messes up the 8th grade going up to the high school, because that has been very successful.
So we always seem to be adjusting our schedules, whether it be graduation or whatever, to match with somebody else. How come Putnam's not changing their end so we could share?
It was a little more flexible for us to do so because, first of all, Dr. Mayo wanted to go to block schedule anyway. So that was just right, it was an opportunity for that, but they've already adjusted their staffing. Actually, it helps a little bit because we do have a couple of math periods that we're covering with a long-term sub, which we won't have to do next year. So we save a few periods, believe it or not. And the arts, Kate Anderson, the science teachers are loving the idea because now they've got more time. So, but it's an adjustment if you're a math teacher, and it's an adjustment if you're an ELA teacher to open up that period.
Stretch that out. You gotta keep somebody's interest for them.
And they're eliminating those study periods, which most districts have eliminated years ago. We hung on to it because we wanted to give kids the opportunity to get some of their work done that they were failing to do, but with Abby prodding them along the way and staying on top of these kids, that doesn't seem to be as much an issue. And in block scheduling, you do allow for some independent time. So students can, we just don't want that to turn into Okay, well, I'm gonna teach for 15 minutes and the rest of the time is just on, do your homework. That's not block scheduling. So there's work that has to be done around that. But for those that need the extra time, especially in the culinary arts program, you could imagine, right? If they're making something, 50 minutes isn't gonna do it.
I like the idea of the whole culinary arts program. I think that's gonna be kind of an incubator for other things, because let's face it, if we can have Putnam students come here for culinary arts. Looking at it as a business, it makes our business more competitive in the market. Hopefully, we can retain more students where they might have gone to another school for culinary. Or vice versa, maybe shop or whatever, so hopefully this is a nice little test. And hopefully we can start to retain more students from going to other, vocational or ag or whatever.
I know that Putnam doesn't have the kind of shop we have.
So again,
So,
But they kind of do their curriculum towards nursing in that school, don't they?
right,
so,
We have students that are interested
right,
in
this
that. That's what she said.
could be a nice little collaboration.
It makes sense.
they have a CNA program, so the students come out of there with a CNA certificate, they can go right to work. We're very interested in that. So I know I had lunch with the CEO from Dave Kimball. He took all the superintendents to lunch to tell us about their merger that's currently underway. And letting us know they're still a community hospital and want to be very much involved in our educational process. So I talked to Kyle and said, hey, we're kind of talking about this, nursing and CNA. And he said, well, like we do in Putnam. And I said, yes, I said, and there's some talk around collaborating. So he's invited us to contact him and we're hoping to go there and have a
That's
chat
awesome.
with him.
I have just two questions. One may or may not be a high school one, and the other one is. So things like the theater, like Mary Poppins, I know there's obviously a dollar sign that is associated, and I know things like the mystery dinner help augment, the cost of the playbill and whatever. Did we assign any kind of monies for future theater productions to at least get us the rights to the play that we're gonna do or
So
something like that?
Funny you mentioned that. Bill and I just had a chat about that this morning. I said to him, you do know that we have a separate line just for the drama theater. I said, you do know that line, and BOE doesn't fund it. You do know that line's gonna run in the negative until we have the show and we can pay the bills. But we have been running that show, those shows on ticket sales
Right.
primarily. I did say to Bill that at the end of this year, we may end up where we don't have enough money in the kitty to buy the royalties for next year.
Right.
And that might have to be a curriculum expense, which is appropriate, right? But that might have to come out of my budget if we don't make enough money to make ends meet. But it costs about 10,000 to run that show every year. We figured that part out. This year, we're saving a little money because Mary Poppins Junior doesn't require a live orchestra. So we're not paying the musicians, even though it's a nominal amount of money we give them. We don't have to spend that this year because you have to use their recording. It's by their rules. So,
I'm just
but no,
wondering,
nothing is budgeted. The goal was always to try to make that work by ticket sales.
Right.
And has that worked out by ticket sales?
So far,
And then my
by
second,
the skin of our teeth, I'm telling you.
it's small money, but I just was curious, under 55, graduation expenses, it's almost double. And I just wondered, are we doing nothing special? Or is there something different? Or I wasn't sure what the
Yeah,
difference
right.
was.
Yeah, that's where that spending would help. Why the increase there? I mean, it's little money, but it's almost double, yeah.
I think we're more for chair rentals. I know that. And we keep them longer. No, the year before we kept them longer. But we are paying a little bit more for chair rentals. I know that. I don't know if she captured all the fees, but we can get back and get you an answer on that.
Yeah, okay, we don't need the
Yeah,
answers tonight,
just
just these are
curious,
questions.
yeah.
And I mean.
Yep.
And that's small dollars, but somebody's gonna ask the question.
While we're questioning large percentage, so it's not a lot of money, but large percentage again. Line 64, musical and other objects. 700, it's not a lot of money, but when you start looking at 750%,
Right.
I'm sure there's a reason.
Yeah, that's a big jump. So,
How many tubas do they need?
I think I have an explanation on that one.
okay, if you don't have an answer right away, you can get back to us next week. We'll be here again on Monday.
Structural.
Yeah, that's a huge percentage.
And remember when we presented the budget last year, we presented you with the percent increases, but then that column, when it became a public document, we didn't put the percent increases. So that'll be something you're gonna have to decide. Do we keep that column in? Do we take that column out? Because it can be horrifying when you look at 700%.
Well, but for us, it's a great number to have.
It is, definitely. That's why we left it there.
Another question in regards to music.
1 second, just.
Yep.
Matt, your line question, which line was it?
64.
Music, other objects.
I think what's happening there, and this happened a couple of times because we have, as you would imagine, there's a lot of moving parts to pulling this together. And
Is it like adding additional lines
I
together?
believe we have, yeah, for example, if you look at line 4. In the explanation, I sort of anticipated your question.
Okay.
Matt.
Budgeted
Oh,
line
I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
So unfortunately, policed them as we tried. There were these little
Okay,
Thank
That
you.
answer.
nudges that
that's,
permeated
that
the
is
document. I tried to
fine.
flag them out.
we're buying new textbooks for line 59. High school.
Span-
You want to handle that one, Linda?
textbooks. Yeah,
Yeah,
you just want to handle that one, but our Spanish textbooks are from, I think, the 1970s, if I'm correct.
The language hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't. But the books.
No, but the teacher has.
Couple times.
But the books have gone through many hands and they look at, the covers are off, they're they're nuts.
Okay, the other one's.
Kathleen, I like your explanation.
Might have added slang words and stuff.
Yeah, new dialect.
Language has not changed, no, but the books have been loved a lot.
Or
But
not
that,
loved.
that happens every 10 or 15 years. We just have to replace books.
Of course, I'm only.
No, I know you are, but that's a real eye opener. If we had some of these books at the budget discussions on a table like we've done in the past.
Oh, remember somebody
Look,
carried the
people.
red wagon?
Yeah. that was
Yeah.
not
Noveline.
the wagon.
Noveline with the red wagon with all the old textbooks.
But they did that years ago when the TPQE, they had all of those books.
Yeah,
Out, just to show people why the kids had to work.
well, we
with.
should be taking classes online with language classes.
We do a lot online.
I know.
But but sometimes you need a book. in your hands.
Yes.
And
Right. Okay, who's doing all the traveling? Stop it. 79. That doubled.
Right.
I believe this was a request around some of the PE activities that they had going on.
Yeah. And we need that, so that's fine.
Bill.
Yep.
I'm not seeing anything, do we still have coverage for the weight room
Yes.
person? Is
Yeah.
that, are still covered under that grant?
yes,
Okay.
for all of next year, and it might, I think we have until the end of. It's either 2024 or the beginning of 2025 to spend that money. So luckily, it's spread out for a while. Okay, so I'm happy about that. And remember, we used, so it was a $20,000 grant to buy equipment and the trainer. We used other grant monies that we had and bought the equipment, so all the money is going to the trainer.
Okay.
I'm in the middle school now on line 124. Are we buying more of those science kits?
So those are every year,
Okay. But
and
we just had to buy more this year because I think we didn't buy as much last year.
so the thing about those kits are, that they are refurbished every year. So the kits go back to East Bay. The consumables that are inside them for their experiments are refurbished and they come back. What happened, and even in this current budget, even though we've been having those science kits, we know for several years, somehow they weren't budgeted for in this current budget. So 28,000 is going to come out of the curriculum resource line in my budget so that gets covered. But what we did was it's an every year expense, so we put it where it's supposed to be. And so K8 are using the kits. Lena Canoia, who teaches the science at the elementary, felt like she's going through the K kit this year, and she feels like she wants to do more in-depth study, so she's going to do away with the kits in K. And use some other materials, which I agree with her, because she's lived through a year now and she feels like it's more developmentally appropriate for the K kids. And then 1 through 8 will remain on the East Bay cycle. So, yeah, I mean, Bill will tell you, they go back and forth 2 or 3 times a year with the kits. They take them back to East Bay, pick up another one and bring them back. So, but they're well used. And I think switching Lena to a UA and teaching science has been a wonderful change. And kids are learning science every week. And I'm happy about that because now they're building a way to build lab reports. Lucy has worked with Lena right down at kindergarten. They're starting with lab reports and now they'll build all the way to 8th grade. So by the time the kids get to high school, they can write a really good lab report. So we're happy about that.
On that same note, I just noticed this applies to the elementary school too. So if you look
Yeah.
at line 172, that's actually where the bulk of the kits are. It
Yeah.
looks like I missed one of my changes over 10,000, so sorry about that.
Okay.
That $23,000 increase is for science kits in the elementary school.
So it's gonna be 23,000 every year to refurbish them? Okay.
Yeah, the killer, as Melinda mentioned, was that really, it seems like every year we did an exercise of stealing from here and there
Yeah.
to pay for this. So it's something we're committed to, so it belongs in the budget.
And how much, hypothetically speaking, if we were buying just textbooks, new textbooks every other year? I know textbooks are expensive, but I don't have a concept of how much. So for one grade's worth of, say, science textbooks, is ballpark, any idea? Yeah.
So it depends on
Yeah.
the program. I can tell you just upgrade the reading program's 100,000, so. But here's the thing about teaching science. The science book doesn't teach science.
Oh, I
It's
know.
all those consumable things.
As a scientist, I'm aware it's a
Yeah.
touch.
All the little critters that come, you just love them, the mealyworms and the little crayfish and all that stuff is part of that kit. So
Yep.
they get all of those expendables when the kits come. And then we're ensured that everybody's teaching standard in science. And the biggest complaint I've gotten, and Lucy's the curriculum leader in science, the biggest complaint I've gotten from Lucy is that the students are not coming up with that background knowledge. So they get into 8th grade where now it becomes a little sophisticated, right? And the types of things they're learning and that they're not better prepared for it. So she's all over it from kindergarten to grade 8. And working tightly with Lena this year because she's out of the classroom. Remember, we put her back in the classroom. We give her 1 day a week due to good scheduling so that she can come out and work with Lena. She works with all the science teachers, but she's primarily trying to set that foundation so that when they come up to the middle school, they're in a better place. So.
When I was in high school, we had to go catch our own frog for biology.
Yeah, we used to have to go over to the little thing over by the track between the playground and the track and find like
Gotta get your own thing.
tadpoles.
Apparently I was
and
spoiled.
stuff.
I came in a plastic bag.
It doesn't happen anymore.
No, just my question was in relation
You
to,
do that.
you know, the 22,000, seems like a fair amount of money every year, but in relation to, say, textbooks, you're getting more, like you said, active learning. I was just curious as a scale of expense.
Yeah,
So,
so I suppose I could get an analysis on that. I just think of the electromagnetic kit that we teach in grade 4. All of those batteries and the wires and the
Yeah.
bulbs and I can't even imagine teachers having the capacity to go out and get that stuff.
right, and I
Which they
wasn't,
were in the past.
right, and I wasn't questioning if it's worth it, because I know, I'm sure it is,
But one
but
versus the
one
other.
versus the other as more as a talking point.
Mm.
Yeah,
So-
I will definitely have Lucy do that for me. I'm sure she'll,
I'm just
Sure.
more out of curiosity, not out of judgment.
yeah, okay. And the way we're assessed for science now is more of an inquiry-based model. So the students are presented with tables and charts, and then they have to analyze data and then, come up with a solution or an end of an experiment. And so the more we can give them opportunities to think through that, and that's well done hands-on, so.
So the middle school total, general salary has gone up. We've added a position. Or filled a position.
Where is that?
Line
Captain?
6.
Was
Yeah.
that the media center?
That is half of the media center portion that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. The other half will show up in the elementary school.
We always have.
Doesn't have its own line.
Oh, yeah, it does have its own line right above.
1.7, you're talking about that?
174,
You
right? Middle
moved it.
school?
Yeah. It
You
had
have
its own
one
line.
26,
126.
It's
So
been moved,
127
so that's why it's zeroed.
No,
It's still included though.
24.5, it has its own line, but then you go down. The middle school general salary has gone up.
Right,
It's up 10.7.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the middle school general salary is a collection of. I guess I would say it's the teachers that don't have their own line. For some reason in the way it's budgeted in the middle school, there's one big bucket. As you can see, it's $1.3 million.
Yes, so we've added a position or
is that salary increases?
well, salary increases is
Yes.
2.5
Right.
plus steps. That's not 2.5.
No, it's not 2.5.
So,
So I'll get a.
yeah,
can you dig out
look at it,
who's
see,
behind
we
that?
might have
Yep.
added a position or filled a position that was empty for a while, who knows?
Well, we hired someone at a higher step than we had
Could be.
previously.
Yeah. The steps are not in that 2.5.
Well, Melinda and I talked about that to try, because
Okay.
3 was used in the past and we felt like the 2.5 would cover the steps.
And
too.
that covers the raises and the
That's
steps?
the hope, yes.
That's. Maybe. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, that's close. Yeah, that's cutting it close, Bill. I'd take a look at that.
Okay.
Because on the 14 and above, the 2.5 is pretty much what we agreed to in our salaries. And the steps on top of that,
Wasn't it a weighted like 285, 28 something?
I don't know, have Bill look at,
Yeah.
Bill look at between the
See what the weighted-
salary increases we gave
Right.
and the steps, I think we're coming in over 2.5%.
Yeah.
So I'd look at that. Because that doesn't apply to everybody, that only applies to the teacher.
Right.
Everybody else, I think we're very safe with 2.5%.
But like you extended out the healthcare, I think you find if you extend these out, some of these out, it's gonna be higher than that, I think.
Yeah, just the
Right.
teachers, so.
Yeah.
Well, no, who else is on steps? But that's like every through this, the secretaries,
Yeah,
it's
but
like only every
well,
3
the
years. they
Teachers
go
one
up.
is the biggest,
Paras go every 3 years,
3
right? They
years
get
or something, yeah.
steps.
yeah, but the
But
teachers,
that's, I wouldn't get too.
That's
concerned.
not a lot of money,
No.
but.
No,
the teachers
But-
have the biggest impact on
the
the budget.
teachers could
Well,
make
yeah,
an
of course.
impact.
You could do the same analysis you did with healthcare. Bump everybody up on step, give everybody the increase that are at top step and see what that bottom number is.
Don't mean to give you a lot of work, but
Yeah, well,
if you do it just like healthcare, it's gonna pretty much show, right, very close to what it is.
Okay. Art, I'm not gonna
Patrick
worry
can do
about
that.
supplies. Cause they need them, they need them. And inflation.
Yeah, I will say the supplies are, if you were to flip through these requests, that's where a lot of those supply numbers are generated from. Also, one thing I learned, well, interesting fact. Those sheets are ultimately used as the order sheets in the summer to order the supplies. So it's kind of a killing two birds with one stone. There, so those supply numbers are, I mean, there's this many Post-its, this many things of, you know, you name it, it runs the gamut.
And if we have to make reductions and we say to a principal, you're gonna have to reduce your supply line by X. They can go through those sheets and decide what's not happening.
And is that, line 168, you're talking about the 2,900% increase?
Yes, that's probably, there's some of that is the increase and some of it is probably just the budget landing in different lines.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we had to rely on the coding that comes out of the schools because there's only so much of us chasing the stuff down. And they may not code it perfectly from year to year, or someone might just code all of their supplies to the other supply line versus
Right.
instructional supply. So unfortunately, there is some movement between lines.
And I'm down into special ed now. Under pupil services, line 214. And we're talking about the special ed coordinator's cell phone.
Yes, I think that's increased because I believe April's cell phone is picked up this year, right, Melinda?
Yeah,
we're thinking of
we
something,
gave
right.
them
Okay. No problem.
secretaries a reimbursement every month.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
I think it's,
Probably should have been all along. We need to contact Chris or
yeah,
something.
that's what it
Yep.
is. It's
Okay.
$25 a month, so it's.
Okay. New equipment. This looks like a lot. Okay. Special ed gym replace equipment. So what's the difference between, oh, that's middle school.
We talked to Chris about this at one point during that meeting. Melinda. A lot of this, if I remember it, had to do sometimes with. Let's see, something related to hearing aid batteries or something. I
That's
was
right.
wondering if that would ring a bell.
That's
with you.
right.
It was a long meeting, that one.
But I
Can
do
we get
remember him
reimbursed?
talking about the audiologist and the hearing aid batteries and something else.
Can we get reimbursed from that, through Medicaid or?
Dependent upon whether or not
Yeah.
the child is eligible for that. Not every special ed student is.
But we're still responsible for replacing the hearing aid batteries if they're not, if they're not eligible for Medicaid? Wouldn't their parents be responsible?
I'm sure they are, but I don't know what the deal is between the audiologists and Chris and batteries, but we can look.
And I wish Chris were here because he probably.
Well, he will be, won't he, at a future meeting?
He will be here at the end of the, yes.
Okay, because I know my audiologist, when I had hearing aids that needed batteries, they were free. That was included with the hearing.
I'll ask him that question,
Don't
but
quote me on the hearing aid batteries. I was trying to remember.
Well,
exactly.
okay, well, that's.
there was a
okay.
conversation about that though, Bill, I
Yeah.
do remember, and I don't know where that went.
Of course, I have rechargeable now.
I don't think I wrote it down, so.
Mm. Okay, that's just. And that's reflected in these costs of the Medicaid reimbursements.
Mhm.
Medicaid reimbursement isn't that high, is it around 11,000-12,000?
It's not that much.
Well, something.
I thought it was a lot higher. At least we're doing it now. We weren't doing it in the
Yeah,
past. right?
I know.
A lot of paperwork.
So Bill, I'm pretty sure you said this already when you did your initial spiel, but just refresh me.
Sure.
So did we allocate then a couple of extra students in special ed?
We did not.
Okay,
this
we did
time
not.
Because, as Melinda explained, the hope is this year, there's at least one, There's one student.
There's one student that has a high tuition of about over 200,000 that ages out in March
Okay.
of this year. So we took into consideration that position, that one. And then there's another student that is also going to age out of the program shortly. So between the two of them, we felt like, well, there's two tuitions.
So they're in the mix, but they
But
won't.
They
be in
won't
the
be
mix.
next year.
I see. Okay.
Unless somebody moves in tomorrow.
And that's what we've always struggled with, that.
But that gives us two people.
Right,
Which is
and
good.
that's why, once again, in trying to manage the top line, it's tempting to stash things here and there and everywhere, but it bites you in the end.
Right.
You have to assume that it's gonna
So
be
they're
flat.
in.
We're
the
gonna get someone
tuition-
in the district that's gonna probably.
Right,
afford that.
that's what I'm saying,
But there
right.
could be somebody to leave.
They're in those numbers.
And
They're
we
in
always
those
talked about
numbers
padding that.
for next year.
But we always get
So if they
messed up
age
there.
out, we've got that cushion for the transients that move in and out. Okay, great.
You know,
So we don't have to put that $200,000 line that we put in for
Right,
transients.
right. Yeah, matter of fact, I think you'll see that line, the transient tuition is one of the lines that Chris consolidated down.
Mhm.
It was at the top, if I remember.
Yeah, it's more special. ed.
Yeah, it was line 176. It's
Okay.
0 this year.
Okay,
I think that's on the other,
they are in the actual tuition line.
isn't that on the
So
other
we know
place?
they're gonna age out. So that gives us a cushion.
We put a separate line in last year, Tom.
What's the line that's, I can't see the number here,
The good thing we did.
it is. a good thing to do.
235.
235, is that? Just reflecting? The overall increase? No.
Sorry, 236.
Yeah, but
I couldn't read it either. 236.
special ed other placements.
Yeah, special ed other
236.
placements. They went from 953, 630 to 1.3.
And don't forget, a component of the pupil services budget is getting where we should have been all along from a budgetary perspective.
Which was
Right.
one of the key drivers, right?
Right.
Part of the key driver?
Exactly.
Okay,
So this reflects what Chris's estimation is a more accurate other placement number for 2024, whereas last year it just wasn't sufficient.
what is
And
that?
that's why we were at a $700,000 deficit. Because last year it wasn't appropriately budgeted.
But part of the in and out of the students we were just talking about, that's part of this as well.
Yes, that'll impact some of that. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
You know, and I don't want you to think that we didn't go over our budget needs up till this point. We did, but then I don't know. I know when the final budget came to play and got presented to the board, like the numbers shifted around.
This one's always been a moving part of this whole area, so it's a.
You're never gonna, there's always gonna be a problem. I've been doing this for 40 years. There's always a problem in special education because you cannot predict anything. And you want to do the right thing by kids, first of all. And it's not that we're giving away the bank, because we're not, the store. We're not doing that. We're making sure that our students' needs are appropriately met. And luckily, we know we can meet some of those needs here with the right supports.
The unfortunate or fortunate, however you want to look at it, when there's a change in this area, it's usually a substantial number. Which is
That's
hard to
right.
budget for.
Has the biggest impact outside of teacher salary.
Right.
I know, and that's, believe me, you know, I sometimes have to talk Chris off the ledge because he's killed himself to try to, you know, bring kids back into district meetings after meetings, and he's successful. And 2 weeks later, someone moves in, and it's the nature of the position. But it's so frustrating, right? Because he wants to come in with a balanced budget, and I try to explain to
It's
him,
not gonna happen.
I've not seen it in my career, but you go for it, because I would love to be able to do that.
Well, at least teachers' salaries, you know where you're going to be, or you can get pretty close. That you'll never get close. I mean, one placement. Besides the tuition, transportation on top of that, and you might have a power on top of that.
Or a nurse,
Yeah.
depending on the
Well,
child's
right.
disability, right?
And people don't understand that besides morally, we're legally obligated to do it. It's not like we have a choice.
It never seems to go the other way. They never move out of town.
They come here because
You know, there is one other thing, we, trying to remember when we went over this, but we're liable to a student until they're 21, correct?
Actually,
Well, more.
close to
Is it
22.
more? We account for that in this as well? Okay,
We should. Yes,
All right.
that's why.
But I can't,
That's why
yes.
we have that transition
That,
program.
I believe that the
The
students
tra-
that Melinda's talking about aging out are reaching that.
They are reaching that age. And so then we will no longer be responsible, and then, there's transition planning for those students, but then they become, the responsibility of the family or what other federal or state agencies that can provide them with support, depending upon what they need, but, yeah, so that's what happens. They age out. Our transition program where kids graduate, right, at the high school, but then there's that gap between 18 and 22 where we're still responsible, even though we only have a few kids in the transition program right now. In another year after next, we're gonna, that class is gonna be like, I don't know, 5 or 6 kids. So it's gonna be a large number.
so I know I've asked this. And I don't want to sound. What do I call it?
You're already sounding that.
Yeah.
So,
I don't want to sound like, like we're just pushing the students away. There's another word, it's not coming to my mind. But have we? Or are there regulations against why? The parents' insurance does not kick in sooner before the age of 23
yeah,
for
because
some of the costs.
federal law has protected the children under that age span. And so that supersedes this, and no insurance company will pick it up because federal law says that the school department is responsible for the student until that age.
And there's no reimbursements or
Well, if they
percentage that comes from it?
Right, so the excess cost, depending on,
Yeah, no,
they hit the
I know
threshold.
that spot, but
Right.
I'm saying that the parents. Health insurance, nothing. Okay, all right, that's fine.
no, but Chris, I will, and he'll talk about this. Chris is in litigation with a couple of situations where residential conversations, right? Or if you have a residential student, his argument is we're responsible for the educational portion only and not the 24/7 care.
I would.
So he's battling that, but it's a tough battle because the federal law and state law kind of lean more toward the other way. But he's been successful with one recent case. So, and that took tons of time and effort to establish that. But that's when if a student's 24/7 in care, well, then where does our responsibility lie? His position is it lies for the educational portion of it.
Right,
but
during
not
school
for the-
hours or whatever you want to
Right.
call it, not the,
So he's pushing back on that in 2 cases, I
Okay.
know.
all right.
But that's another thing that we could share with Putnam or Woodstock, or the transitional program for those students. Perhaps we could,
Putnam has a nice program. Our 2 programs are like meeting with each other. They share Thanksgiving dinner and that kind of stuff, but yeah, I would like to see that get, and who knows what's gonna happen moving forward, but
Right.
we also know that just having one kid in that program between tuition and the bus fees pay for the staff that's in that room right now.
oh, see, I was just gonna say, it doesn't pay, but if we're transporting and all,
So it kind of just,
it's a wash.
it's a wash. But I know not next year, the year after, that room is gonna be filled with several students.
If they stay.
Some don't stay.
We're required by law to educate, this is a curiosity question. We're required by law to keep educating into 21 or 22. Are they required legally to stay after a certain
No,
time?
after they graduate, they don't have to.
Just curious.
You quit school at what, 17 now? They wanted to.
Yeah, it's going up to 18 just recently.
Oh, I thought it went from 16 to 17. So
17.
they don't even have to stay through high school. They can go
Right.
whenever they want.
But then then we take it as a negative against the district accountability. It's a,
Can't get ahead.
Okay, so the next item is, I'm assuming that's additional stipend on the phone, which is 9,291. And the big.
What is it? 90.
291.
Yes, that's actually, there's an accounts payable person and payroll person. Are members of the Secretaries Union,
Mhm.
and their cell phones are now reimbursed at $25 a month. Like the other secretaries, and
Okay.
and boy, their boss uses it.
What is the 273 attendance incentive?
What line is that?
273.
So Melinda, tell me, jump in please, but a variety of the unions have attendance incentives in there.
yeah, it's a
Contracts.
contract. It's not what you're thinking.
I know, that's. Alright, so
No.
what is,
So if I believe the teachers have it, the secretaries have it, the parents have it. If they have in perfect attendance, and I think it's on a quarter by quarter basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's $25 or something like that, isn't it?
Oh,
It's not a
no.
lot of money.
It's not a
Oh,
lot.
it's more, well, it's more than
Higher
that.
for the teachers.
Yeah.
It is higher and it. But it's in the contract, so I won't say anything else.
We've been trying to get it out, but you know, it's like you're paying them to show up for work. And I've opened my mouth again when I shouldn't have, but.
That's why I just say it's contract.
yeah,
Say it's in a
Contract.
got it.
Contract here.
That contract comes up in another year. We have the Paris coming up soon. So those are things that we always put on the table.
Mhm.
And then, you give and take, and
Yeah.
some things stick, but we've made a lot of headway over the years, so, every round, we get some wins, so.
Every bargaining unit has given up a little bit.
Yes,
They've gotten
yes,
some.
they have. They, to be honest and to be fair, they have given up. Some ground, we give some, they give some, and we've had very, very. Productive negotiating sessions over the years.
So I have just a couple of questions on the district-wide section. So what is homeless pupil transportation?
That's Linda's
All right,
question.
So so this is federal law, first of all. So I am living in Thompson. My family and I are living in Thompson, and we get evicted from our apartment. And we move in with our relatives in Putnam. We have to provide so students are allowed to remain in the district of origin, which would be Thompson, right? Because they became homeless in Thompson. But yet they got evicted, they got thrown out of their house, and they've moved in with another family in Putnam. We have to pay for the transportation from Putnam to Thompson and from Thompson to Putnam. The good news is, because they are residing in Putnam, Putnam will also get 50% of that bill. So we split the transportation costs. It's usually not so easy. They moved to Massachusetts, they moved to Rhode Island.
They've moved though, then they're not homeless, they've moved.
No, They don't
You know
have,
what I
they
mean?
don't have a place of permanent residency. They have moved in, they have coupled up with another family, that's federal law. And so we have to split the transportation with the residing house.
And we know that they've been evicted. It's not that they've just moved
It
and
doesn't-
decided to
so
move
it-
in with another family
So,
and
so
said
maybe
they were
it's not eviction. Maybe it's, I don't know, their house was foreclosed, or they can't find a place to live. So the district where the children originally were separated and became homeless now becomes the school of origin, which means then we need to transport the students back to us if the family wants to keep stability for their children's education. There's a cost associated with that. And not only is it just Thompson students moving out, right? But it's on the flip side, say Putnam is the school of origin and they moved in with a family in Thompson, it doesn't matter, we still split the bill.
And if it becomes a long-term living situation, are they still homeless? Because to me, that means they've moved in.
So there's no a timeline in which they now become residents of that new.
No, so a whole
technically
year
that's
can
not
go
over
by.
tenants.
A whole year can go by. We have a homeless liaison, that's Ashlyn, who is the social worker at the elementary school. She's up on all of that. She has been excellent at trying to find solutions for students who are in motels and so when I first came to Thompson, we might have had one homeless student a year, maybe two. We're in double digits now. That's as a result of the pandemic. But we're in double digits. And if families are coupling up, that's considered homelessness because you don't have a residency of your own. And it's hard for us to understand that. But the federal law is pretty clear on it. So it's McKinney Vento, if you ever want to look it up. But I have to call Ashlyn myself because sometimes I get into the same place you're at. Well, why do we have to pay for this? But then she'll explain what the rule is. We're in double digits now, and I've not seen that before here. So you can see the sign of the times.
And we can be sure that they've moved in with much like people saying they live in town but really don't or whatever. Do we know for a fact they've moved in with somebody? Do we have like a
We have a
person
full
checking
sheet on
residents
that.
and checking to see, are they really the only person living in this house? And they've just said they moved in with a family?
So I'll give you a good solid example. The blue house at the end of Thatcher closed down,
Yes.
right?
Right.
There were 26 children in that house. Many of them were evicted because it closed down. So there's transportation among some of those students to come back to Mary R. Fisher. And remember, regardless of the student's residency stability or not, the right thing to do for the student is that they have a solid academic career. And we don't disrupt their academics for the year. Very often, if we know that they've moved to Putnam and now they've established and gotten an apartment, we will tell them at the start of next school year, you must enroll your child in Putnam Public Schools. And Greg has done a lot of checks for us back and forth, but it is an expense that you can, it's kind of like special ed because you don't know how often that's going to happen and you don't know the distance also. So if you're going into Rhode Island or into Massachusetts, that's an expensive transportation for back and forth.
Might be a second one coming up too, the other big White House just past that, that's Duncan's, I heard is going up. Same situation in February.
Is that the one that they already have boarded?
No, next.
Are they allowed to go to their new schools? They move to Burrillville. Can they go to Burrillville School District?
They
Well,
can't,
I understand
You can't
not wanting
force
to,
them.
right, I understand not wanting to change districts in the middle of the year if it is a drivable thing. I respect that as a student's stability, but I'm just curious if they're allowed to go to.
sometimes parents make that option because it's easier for them.
Yeah.
So it depends, but you know, the sign of the times is that we started off with maybe one or two every, that we reported. And not even for the whole year, and now we're in double digit numbers.
But it
That's
sounds like-
happened on the heels of the pandemic and going forward.
It sounds like there's a fine line between that and illegal residency.
Right.
Because here we are at one point, we're checking residencies for people in town. They're clearly living out of town. You see
But
what I'm
if
saying?
they've claimed homelessness, that kind of trumps it.
Supersedes of it.
There's a lot of crazy rules and this is gonna be one of
It
the
is
more
crazy.
insane ones.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, what do you
I mean,
have for
can
waste?
people work the system?
Well,
Probably, but I think for the ones that we currently have on the books, Ashlyn is in communication with those families regularly. And we have a good handle on what's going on in those families, especially many of them that came out of that blue house. So, and even Teague is involved very often with that. But at the end of the day, it is an unbudgeted expense that can hit us. Because we are obligated to provide that transportation And sometimes we provide the transportation back and forth, and then Bill's office generates an invoice to the other district.
Right. I mean. Kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here because you wanna do the right thing, but at the same point, it's also the transportation is the cost of the student. You know, because we have a cost per student.
And homelessness,
No, what I'm saying is technically they're living outside of our region.
I get that part.
So there's a cost for the student, which we all know is like what, 16 or 17,000 per student, plus the transportation, so it's a snowball. Which again, the fine line of homeless or new residents.
Well, that's why we keep track of that, and I think that once you have a homeless liaison, every district has to have one, and Ashland's done a remarkable job staying on top of
Yeah.
all of the students that have that need at this time, so yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces with that. I fought that battle for years. There's a little bit of money that we put in Title I. You have to by federal law, put an allocation. I think it's $5,000 in this year's budget. So I've had Bill, okay, charge the transportation to that first 5,000 under that grant before we start hitting the BOE budget. But yeah,
So my other two questions was the crossing guard salary. Looks like it's new, but we've always had a crossing guard. So is it just moved money from some other line item that used to be something else? Okay.
yeah, it was, so it's in addition to Greg's budget. He assumes it in his budget, but we needed to tease that out because we've always had the two crossing guards.
And my last question is it possible to make a line item for that incentive program that isn't the attendance incentive program? It doesn't have to be a lot, because I think, like, obviously I will help do something to raise money for it, but you know. If we wanted to implement it in the middle school and other things at some point.
We could shift some money around out of that in the scheduling line. Maybe we could pull a few dollars out of there. Just to put it aside for the activity.
Right.
Like that.
Right.
Yeah, we kind of broke the bank on the last incentive. The
Yeah.
Kids had a blast.
Yeah,
So,
they did.
you know,
Little band.
and you raised, I mean, you did a lot of work.
Yeah, no. And I mean, the next one's, some of it seems like it would be, it's a donatable item. And then if there's a possibility to do a beach day, you know, that might be just a
I
bus.
want to go to the Woo Sox game.
Ooh,
I
okay.
wrote to them today to ask them if they donate 100 tickets.
Yeah, so maybe just transportation, you know, so that would be nice. And I'm still planning to try to do like the Red Sox tickets for the top finisher or something at the end of the year, but
I'm hoping
yeah.
it's having an impact.
yeah,
I know this last go around, anybody that got the top 100 point getters. And it was everybody that almost had points in there got to go.
Yeah.
So that was good.
I'm looking here at the magnet school. That would be nice. All right, I want to go back to line 304. Shouldn't that line be decreasing? I thought we gave up QVC.
So that's a magnet school. So that's an art program that students are going to. I think, I don't know if there's still one in a marine trades program, but there's several magnet schools.
Okay.
And QMC, we still pay for the tuition. We've given up the fact that we're responsible for transportation, but under the fact that of school choice, we still have to pay the tuition, which is about 6,000 a student. It's not a lot of money. We're not
I
sure.
thought we opted out of that entirely.
No, we still are on the hook for the tuition. Yeah,
Oh, so we.
but then we have 3 or 4 kids there, not a lot. But that's art magnet school. I think we had kids in a marine school before. There was one other magnet school that another student went to. So we are responsible by school choice. We don't pay for. We pay for their tuition.
So if somebody chooses to go to Woodstock Academy, do we have to pay for that?
No.
'Cause it's school choice.
No, that's a private school, so it's
It's
like
not a magnet school. Okay.
No, thank God.
Yeah. Okay.
He's asking for a 5% increase in his tuition, so think about those districts, right?
Yeah, they have no choice.
That was right from the horse's mouth today, 5%.
Electric's gonna stay the same?
We got a grant.
I actually asked Bill Burks the same question.
Valentine said that,
We are locked into our contract. His
Oh,
response
our
was
accounts
for another year.
payable's nephew is big in the Woo Sox.
So I know last budget season, and we probably did this, maybe, I don't know. We talked about teaming up with the town and the school in regards to fuel costs, price negotiation, gas, and there was one other thing, electricity.
We've
So
already
did we do
done
that?
so for
Okay.
fuel. We have not done it for electricity yet because the contract is, Kathleen and I were just talking about this, isn't up for another year.
Okay,
So at that point, I've already talked to Amy about it on the town side, and at that point, we're hoping that we can do the same with electricity.
We do health insurance too, don't we? I thought.
Yes.
yeah, that's,
we
I
already
think was
did.
last year.
We locked in. for
And then
fuel
Bill's job
already for
teamed
next
us up
year.
with that.
Yes,
48 a gallon.
What
Yeah,
is it?
348.
Line 296 for VOAG, how many students are we budgeting for that line item?
We're basing it on an average that we've been. Is it, which one are you looking at?
296.
Yeah. That is just about right.
Okay.
Now, we have 10 more kids go there. Well,
They're in trouble.
we're in trouble.
96.
There's been rumbling.
Of students that want to go there.
That's like a special ed situation, though. It's, you can't, you
There's
can't
never know.
nothing, right?
just talk them down off that ledge.
Every year.
What is the disposal service for 338?
That is.
What work?
Cement booth?
Yeah.
Trash removal line.
Yeah.
Trash
It's
removal.
just trash. Okay.
9%.
A Providence company, can't talk about it.
And then is there any
Worcester.
major building improvements or maintenance that is planned for this year? Or no?
Just the locker rooms
Okay.
and the
Well,
painting. in the
Bill
hallway.
usually supplies us with a list of Hillside projects, and we get that back up for that line. Bill usually has a list for us.
Bill will present that when he
Yeah.
comes.
Melinda, under that, where's the line item for the additional repairs for the elementary school playground?
That is in Bill's budget.
Okay,
Where, what line is that in? Do you remember? We left that in. We backed out the 10,350 we got in grants.
great.
And then we put that in there. So it's here.
Okay,
I just don't know what line. You remember, Bill?
They're gonna look.
Might be under repairs. Building repairs and maintenance. It did go up. It could be that.
Didn't go up that much. Oh, building repair and maintenance, yeah, it could be even that, because it went up by 56,000.
Line 346.
What was it? What line?
Line
346.
346. Could be in there.
Okay.
But
So
we
just,
did
does that
put it
cover getting it repaired to the point that it can be usable with,
Yeah.
with the additional outside
So-
funds we collected?
Yeah, so the goal was that I know Marriott Fisher PTO is passionate about putting an ADA compliant playground in a different section. But that could take a couple of years to raise that kind of money. We've got the kids not being able to use that piece of equipment. I just want it repaired so they can use it. So it's 50,000 with 10,350 to the good. We did write the T-Mobile, no mobile grant, thanks to the PTO that sent it to me. That's for 50. If we get that grant, we're good.
Yeah.
But if we don't, I talked to Kathleen and she thought it would be prudent to put it in the OE budget. And the rec department really wants to use it.
Yeah.
As well, for their summer program, their after school. It's used a lot.
It's-
at the playground.
It's usually, it really is, even not necessarily students or rec, even just citizens going up and using it. It's a pretty popular playground. You guys, I don't have to tell you that.
There are multiple times where we walked up to use it
They're
on a weekend, because
We
that's
adjusted it for the new playground.
Just something to do, right?
Playground. So what I did there was I took those numbers right out of the bid from that.
So you didn't adjust it.
Well, that might be a nice catch. I'll have to check.
Yeah, check on that.
Part of that is fuel.
No, that's up in the one.
That's
above.
the one.
Yeah, that's a separate one.
What number was that?
That's 341. That one up, but they did go up on others, so check back up.
Kathleen's asking to check the transportation DADCO line. Make sure that's accurate.
Yeah, I thought that was flat this year.
Well, that was just the regular run.
Yeah.
That like
Yeah.
their field trips went up, their bus
The
monitor
late
went up.
bus.
Okay, well, that's a very small portion of the
Right,
thing, and it
right.
just seems that
That-
16%
check that line.
seems a little.
Yep.
High, it could be
So-
right.
I know we had the bid process already, but would there be any chance that between the bid process and the contract process and whenever that is, that the price would change or no, once once they've supplied a bid with a number?
With that,
What's that number?
it should change.
It's gonna change because of that midday run.
Yeah,
Okay,
midday run is.
and this reflects,
We don't know. We're
oh,
checking.
oh, okay.
Checking.
kind of off topic with that. Was there any way to do? 'Cause I know we had some discussion about possibly like combining with other schools that use DATCO for like I don't know, a bulk contract. Is there any way where we could adjust from a 5-year to a 3-year so we could line up with those?
Well,
schools?
that would be something they could discuss, have the lawyer discuss with them, then line us up with Woodstock. Because Woodstock has, what, 2 or 3 years left on their contract, then whoever that lady was from DATCO was shaking her head, but that doesn't mean we can't discuss that
Mhm.
when we do.
Just,
the
it would give us more leverage and options. it
Well, I
seems
don't
like, you
know, would it?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
If
Yeah.
we're locked in on a 5-year, after 3 years,
The price could go up, right,
Right,
right. No,
I mean, that's a lot of territory for them to cover.
right.
big
There-
towns and area.
Two huge towns, the largest areas in Connecticut.
It was questioned, so I figured I would.
Well, we
Put it up there.
discussed that when we first set up the contract with them.
Okay.
So I don't know that
I
it
can
would
talk
give
to
us
her.
any
Any leeway? Okay,
any benefit other than, because we wouldn't allow them to use our garage for repairs, so that didn't help them out.
But you gotta remember, we're,
Yeah, so they go to Woodstock or Barville for repairs.
Yeah.
plus the fuel, we're putting the fuel in those buses for our town. And now you've got situations where it might go to a different town, and now you're doing reimbursement. I mean, it's,
Yeah, that adds up.
Complicates things.
Yeah.
right.
Less easy to track.
I don't think there's any benefit to doing it, other than they could just go to Woodstock and do their repairs, and then we'd get a back charge or something.
Right.
What's, it would get messy. I think. But good question. Yeah, if you look into what we did for that, that was probably. Or did we budget enough? Because where are the athletic runs, the bus monitors?
Yep.
the athletic runs have a line in the. budget.
Oh, in the athletic
58.
departments, but we still need to, where are the bus monitors?
Then we don't have a separate line for monitors. That was already, that was assumed in the flat rate. We've never had a line for bus monitors separately.
Right,
I'll check.
but make sure they're in that number.
Yeah, we have three.
Yeah, the athletic transportation, that's.
Hey, Bill. Line 3, I think it's 363. The decrease on the new tech equipment.
Yep.
Is that put somewhere else? It just seems like a big number.
No, it was actually, I did ask Heather about this and it was, I forget the specific, it might have been hardware related, but it was spending that she had to do last year that wasn't recurring this year.
Okay.
Yeah, because that was a big drop.
Yeah, considering we're trying to grow technology.
So what happened was that she was putting in her budget for flat panel. These things that go up on the wall or roll into the classroom, but she's written a grant for that. So we're hoping that we get the grant. Otherwise, we believe we can get by this year with the projectors and the whiteboards that we have. Every classroom has one. So we're not worried about that.
Has she put somewhere else with the replacement of the Chromebooks? Because we're.
Yes,
trying-
there's a Chromebook cycle in here, so.
Okay.
Let's see, 5th grade gets new Chromebooks and 9th graders get Chromebooks as they. cycle.
I know she had implemented a couple of years ago, the replenishment. Just so
We
we
were
could
lucky
hit
we-
one shot.
We hit the grant funding for a lot of that along the way.
Yep.
But now we have to be on that regular cycle.
I have a random budget question. I know you said we're a little ahead of the town side right now in terms of figuring out our budget. But we know that we are asking for more than we did last year, obviously. Do we know if the town is also in that same
don't.
predicament?
We don't. It comes together a little bit differently there. We use the ClearGov system. And so each of the directors are going in and inputting their budgets, and I know there's. Although the budget is smaller than the Board of Ed side, there's a lot of moving pieces over there too.
Yeah.
And I know, based on the number of questions that I've received personally, and Paula, God bless her, receives on a daily basis. People are aware that this is gonna be a tough year, and they're trying to do a good job over there too.
Like I know they had they bought a new truck last year, and I think the ambulance was obviously a big ticket item. I just didn't know if you knew of any big ticket items that they were hoping to accomplish
Paving is
or
always-
not.
Yeah, I think paving is the other big one.
Right, but if that's a continual.
That's every year kind of.
Yeah.
And we're
That's all.
we're all keeping our fingers crossed that our mild weather continues. I think Amy and I
Right.
talk about it on a daily basis.
Right. As do I.
Send out the salt. So, matter of fact, Steve, you'll see this in the package for Thursday's meeting. Snow removal budget's at 42%, and I looked at that and said, wow, how can that be? Well, we had to buy the salt ahead of time, so. it's,
Oh, you can
you know,
save it for next
Yeah.
year.
Right,
Save
and that's
it,
the good thing, it
right?
doesn't go bad, so.
Right.
We'll use it
Okay.
February.
Sorry,
Nope, that,
okay, we're on the last page,
All right.
right? And we're looking at the, what am I looking? Tech service general admin, which is doubled because we're implementing Power School.
Correct.
Right, and
What is Power School and why are we implementing? it?
Okay, so you remember that we had, way back when, we had Rediker as a student information system. That is our complete database. That is the system that holds GPA, student enrollment, all the data from families. It's our student information system. It's actually the brains of the district. So out of that system, the state, we do all our state reporting. That's how they calculate our state aid. Everything comes out of that system.
What was the
So
name of it?
we used to have Rediker, and Rediker was a horrific SIS system. So we put a committee together and we looked at a lot of different products. And we settled on the Tyler product.
That's what I'm.
And Tyler is actually a Munis product. Not only was it the most cost effective at the time, we weren't really looking at money at that time. We were actually looking at what would be the best match for the district. And the committee, not Melinda, the committee decided they wanted to go with Tyler. I'm fine with that because a conversion to an SIS system is a heavy lift. Well, anyway, Tyler has been sold and has gone belly up, and they told us about 9 months ago that they will no longer run it after the end of June. So we had no choice but to get another SIS system. Everybody in the state uses Power School, so we just decided to use Power School because it talks to the CT SEDS program, which is the new special ed program that Chris and his whole department have been in agony for the last year. It talks to that system. It talks to some of our other systems. So Power School is the way to go. It's not cheap. It was double what we were paying for Tyler. And the conversion's already started. I don't know how we negotiated a contract with them so that we paid them a little bit out of Heather's budget this year to start the conversion process. They've started that. She'll talk about that a lot. They started that about maybe 2 months ago and they're knee deep into it now, but it's a hard process because it's everything, all of our data, all of our testing, everything is in that SIS system. So I feel good about being in Power School because most of the state uses it. So if a kid transfers from one district to our district, we easily can get some information that way. So it will be better for us in the long run. So that's where we're at. And it talks to Naviance, that particular software. So I'm happy about that. I'm not happy that we have to pay double amount of money for it.
So is this an initial software buy, or is this a reoccurring every year
It's a reoccurring.
subscription? Okay.
It is. Yep. It's a lot cheaper than, I mean, my last district, we were paying 140,000. Of course, we had many more students, but, and it's basically based on a per pupil cost. So, but it's expensive.
The other increase in that line is Munis, which is our accounting software, which is another item that, as we were scrutinizing the budget, it appeared had not been budgeted before.
Oh, that's.
So that's something that is split with the town also.
Are there any licensing increases that go with this as they change their packages or anything?
I think we got the increase number. And you are, the bill is upgrading Munis at one point,
It's
right?
coming in April,
April. Oh, gee.
but that the version of Munis that we're on right now will no longer be supported. So at this point, we don't have a choice. We have to upgrade. It's something that was supposed to happen last year. They wanted to do it in the middle of the audit. No thanks.
Yeah. Love you,
So
but
we
no.
moved it to-
Yeah.
Hey, I have no more questions. Anybody else have questions on this? No?
So when the next week, we have the principals and Greg coming to go over their budgets. And even though I made some modifications to their budget, I think it's important that you hear what they're talking about. Greg does need to give you a real overview of how he's been spending his dollars. He watches his budget like a hawk. I think he's telling me thinks he's gonna come in with a savings at the end of the year of 1,500, and I said, we didn't get through Mary Poppins and graduation and all of that stuff yet, but he's got it projected ahead, so.
And his line items get budgeted here, but they're reimbursed from the town. Through
Right.
security grants, right?
Right,
There's-
so there's 60,000 on the town side.
which this year we're essentially waiting for 60,000 to go up in his lines. And then that money I'll talk to the finance director down there.
I was gonna say, don't you have control? You put control in the checkbook there. We want our money, man, pay up, dude.
We're almost there.
Checks in the mail.
Can you make some of those changes every?
Yes, yep, I wrote them all down.
Okay. All right.
We're gonna do packet 2 tonight. Joke.
Any, okay, next, any citizens comments? Yes, Mr. Herbert?
Remember 1.2 Wilkesville Road. A couple comment questions. I noticed one of the columns, like the third or fourth one over, is the 23 revised budget. Is that a change from the beginning of the year, or is that just?
No, no, the only changes that have happened for the 23 budget, Steve, were from line to line. So in total, it's the same. There have been some transfers to cover things that have come up. Like shot clocks, for example.
Do we have a 23 expected?
Uh,
I don't know. if-
Actually, one of Kathleen's comments was to add the 23 projected spend in.
And the rough guesstimate now, how does it compare to the budget? 23
We were just under budget
overall.
overall for the
Okay.
board of
Basically
ed,
on
but it's very, very close.
Despite the overage and special ed.
Right, yes, so now. Keep in mind, a big component of that projected spend are the encumbrances, and not everybody's perfect about. Encumbering every item they're gonna spend, every dollar they're gonna spend, although pupil services does a heck of a job with that. April Levesque does a wonderful job with that.
But the current year, I think we, if I remember correctly, probably didn't. Didn't we expect a plan on 2 or 3 more students? Special ed students and budget for them? Or this the year we're in now, I'm 2022 to 2023.
Yes, the Board of Ed did add money to the budget. And then when the Board of Finance reduced the budget and the final budget passed, we had to dip into that extra money that we put there to cover those reductions.
Right, the 125 that we talked about earlier was 225 prior to the cut.
I noticed, I heard the word contingency came up and. Well, about it. If you don't ask for it, you're certainly not gonna get it. I would include something for contingency one because there's a real need for it. If you want to include it in the budget and if nothing else, if you give the Board of Finance something to cut. That might make them feel happy. I noticed you mentioned a couple of people talked about the payroll, investigated payroll change. With the inflation that we're seeing, is there a risk or danger of losing staff transitions, staff losses to be replaced with higher levels? And I don't know the contract at all, so I don't know how that might or might not work. But is that a concern if inflation is over last year, been what, in the 8% range or 6% range, whatever? Are we seeing squeeze, teachers seeing squeeze, or all employees seeing squeeze that?
Yes, so
What's in
last,
the contract? I know the contract says 2.5 or whatever, you know, it is. But is, are you gonna see losses because, hey, I can get 6% of some other school district?
yeah, so last year for the very first time, because we had more of that kind of movement than we ever had before. Because people were literally recruiting, right? Superintendents were recruiting from district to district. It's called survival. And so that last summer, for the very first time, I kept a running, so teacher A left at this salary, and then we hired teacher B at this salary. What's the differential? Did they take a family plan or a single plan? At the end of the day, it was leaning more, I was about $40,000 up. And then by the time the dust settled, it more or less washed itself out, but that was last year. But that's always a concern, right? A science teacher would be, or a math teacher would be one of those positions, right? That if they come in at, you know, you have a younger teacher and then that teacher moves to get a higher paying job, and then you're recruiting for someone that can fill that. We want the best teacher in the classroom. We haven't gotten to the point where I've gotten multiple applicants and then I go for the cheaper applicant that we've not been presented with that many applicants to be able to do that. Obviously, you know, when all things are equal, then, you know, in my mind, we like to hire Thompson residents when all things are equal first. And when all things are equal, we are gonna go to the teacher that is not gonna break the budget, right? So, but we haven't been presented with multiple candidates for some of these positions.
Right, the pressure's gonna be building.
Sometimes you're stuck, you gotta
More than in the past.
great candidate. We had to do a little bartering even for a tech education teacher. Two districts wanted that candidate. And I had to go back into his work experience and give him a year's credit. And when I was able to get the teacher, but there were no tech educators anywhere out there. And luckily he liked the little school atmosphere. And so we were able to sell him on just the culture of the high school in and of itself. But there were two other districts that were throwing bonuses at him and all sorts of stuff that we just didn't have the money to do. Luckily, we won out, so,
Sounds good. I'm
but
just worried about the 2.5 sounds pretty minimal at this thing.
I think that exercise now of, okay, you know, this teacher left, the salary at this, the healthcare at this, and then really monitoring who you're hiring against. Before, we didn't have to worry about that. There was always breakage in retirements. I have not heard of one retirement this year. So usually by now, we've gotten a couple that we know are going to retire and we have not heard anything.
No surprises on a year's worth of sick pay that has to be paid.
Right, and then there's that severance piece that we have to pay out.
Right. Hearing nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion. I'll second it.
Okay. We meet here back next Monday at 6 o'clock. To